What happens when Hollywood's most laid-back actor meets late-night television's most calculated host, and a simple interview turns into an explosive confrontation that nobody saw coming? Tonight we're diving into the shocking moment when Owen Wilson was literally escorted off Stephen Colbert's show, after what started as casual banter spiraled into one of the most heated exchanges in late-night history. Before we get into this wild story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us what you think really went down that night, because this story has layers that'll blow your mind. The Late Show's green room was buzzing, with its usual pre-show energy when Owen Wilson walked in, wearing his signature relaxed demeanor, and that unmistakable blonde hair slightly tousled from the New York humidity. He had been booked to promote his latest comedy, a light-hearted romp about middle-aged friends reconnecting through a cross-country road trip. The publicists had briefed Colbert's team about keeping things light, focusing on the film's heartwarming message and Wilson's comedic timing. Everything seemed perfectly orchestrated for another smooth celebrity interview segment. But from the moment Wilson settled into the guest chair, something felt different about Colbert's approach. The host's usual theatrical warmth seemed forced, almost mechanical, as he launched into his opening questions with an edge that caught Wilson completely off guard. Instead of the expected softball questions about working with his co-stars or funny moments from filming, Colbert immediately steered the conversation toward Wilson's past struggles with depression and his well-documented suicide attempt from years earlier. "Owen, your new movie deals with friendship and second chances," Colbert began, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "But let's talk about your own second chances. You've been very open about your mental health struggles, and I'm curious how that darkness influences your comedy." The audience shifted uncomfortably as Wilson's relaxed posture stiffened slightly. This wasn't the direction anyone had expected the interview to take, especially not as the opening volley. Wilson, ever the professional, tried to redirect with his characteristic wow and gentle laugh. "Well, you know, Stephen, I think comedy comes from a lot of different places, and right now I'm just excited to talk about this really fun project we made." But Colbert wasn't backing down. He leaned forward with the intensity of a prosecutor rather than a talk show host. "But don't you think audiences deserve authenticity? Don't you think hiding behind these cheerful characters does a disservice to people struggling with similar issues?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Wilson's trademark easygoing smile began to fade. "I don't think I'm hiding behind anything," he replied, his voice carrying a slight edge that regular Wilson watchers would recognize as uncharacteristic tension. "I think there's a time and place for different conversations, and tonight I thought we were here to talk about a movie that might make people laugh and feel good." Colbert's response revealed the calculated nature of his approach. "But isn't that exactly the problem with Hollywood? This constant need to keep things surface level, to avoid the real conversations that might actually help people?" The host's tone had shifted from conversational to confrontational, and Wilson was clearly realizing this wasn't going to be the standard promotional appearance he had signed up for. The audience, sensing the growing tension, had gone from their usual responsive chatter to an uncomfortable silence. Wilson glanced toward the wings where his publicist stood with increasing alarm, clearly not having anticipated this aggressive line of questioning. The late-night talk show format that usually felt like a comfortable living room conversation had transformed into something that felt more like an ambush interview. "Stephen, I respect what you're trying to do here," Wilson said, his voice gaining strength, "but I came on your show as a guest, not as someone looking to be psychoanalyzed." On national television, the word guest carried particular weight, emphasizing the breach of hospitality that was occurring. In the world of celebrity interviews, there's an unspoken contract of mutual respect, and Colbert was clearly violating those boundaries. But instead of backing down or acknowledging the discomfort he was creating, Colbert doubled down with the fervor of someone who believed he was conducting important journalism rather than entertainment television. "So you're saying that your platform, Your influence comes with no responsibility to address serious issues? The question was loaded with judgment, and Wilson's patience was clearly wearing thin as he realized he had walked into what felt like a setup rather than a genuine conversation about his work and craft. Wilson's demeanor shifted noticeably as he processed the hostile direction of Colbert's questioning, his usually relaxed shoulders squaring as he prepared to defend himself against what was becoming an increasingly personal attack disguised as journalism. "My responsibility," Wilson said with deliberate slowness, "is to be honest about my work and respectful to the people who support it. I don't think ambushing guests on your show serves anyone's best interests." The word ambush clearly struck a nerve with Colbert, whose theatrical persona cracked slightly to reveal genuine irritation beneath. "Ambush," he repeated with mock incredulity. "I'm asking legitimate questions about the intersection of art and personal experience. Isn't that what serious interviews are supposed to explore?" But his defensive tone betrayed that he knew exactly what he was doing, and Wilson wasn't buying the innocent act. Serious interviews require consent from both parties, Wilson fired back, his voice carrying an intensity that surprised everyone in the studio, including Colbert himself. "You booked me to talk about a comedy movie, then immediately started interrogating me about the lowest points of my personal life. That's not journalism, Stephen. That's exploitation." The accusation hung heavy in the air, and for the first time since the interview began, Colbert seemed momentarily speechless. The audience, caught between their loyalty to their beloved host and their discomfort with his behavior, offered only scattered, uncertain applause. Wilson continued, "You want to talk about responsibility? How about the responsibility of a host to treat guests with basic human decency? How about the responsibility to have honest conversations instead of setting up gotcha moments for viral clips?" Colbert's face flushed as he realized his manipulation tactics were being called out in real time, and his response revealed the calculated cruelty behind his approach. "Maybe the problem isn't my questions, Owen. Maybe the problem is that you're not comfortable with your own truth." The personal attack was delivered with Colbert's signature smugness, but Wilson had clearly reached his breaking point. "My truth?" Wilson stood up from his chair, his movement causing a ripple of shock through the studio audience. "My truth is that I came here as your guest, expecting professional courtesy, and instead found someone more interested in humiliating me than having a real conversation. My truth is that this says more about your character than mine." The power dynamic had completely shifted, with Wilson now towering over the seated host both literally and morally. Colbert, realizing he was losing control of the situation, made a desperate attempt to regain his authority. "Owen, I think you're overreacting to some perfectly reasonable questions about your public persona and your responsibility as an entertainer." But his words sounded hollow and defensive, especially compared to Wilson's increasingly passionate and articulate responses. "Reasonable." Wilson's voice rose for the first time, causing security personnel to shift nervously in the wings. "You think it's reasonable to invite someone onto your show under false pretenses and then attack their mental health history for entertainment? You think it's reasonable to use someone's darkest moments as material for your monologue tomorrow night?" The accusation that Colbert was treating Wilson's pain as comedy material clearly hit home, causing the host's face to redden further. The situation reached a tipping point when Colbert, backed into a corner by Wilson's articulate dismantling of his tactics, resorted to a personal attack that crossed every line of professional conduct. "Maybe if you spent less time playing the victim and more time taking responsibility for your influence, we could have a productive conversation," he sneered, his mask of civility finally slipping completely to reveal the calculated malice underneath. Wilson's response was immediate and decisive. "That's it. I'm done here." He began removing his microphone pack, his movements sharp and definitive. "I've been in this business long enough to know the difference between a professional interview and a hit job, and this is clearly the latter." The finality in his voice made it clear that there was no coming back from this moment, and Colbert's desperate attempts to salvage the situation only made him look more pathetic. The studio fell into an eerie silence as Wilson methodically removed his microphone, the small technical sounds amplified in the absence of conversation, creating a tension that everyone present could feel in their bones. Colbert, perhaps finally, realizing how badly he had miscalculated, made one last attempt to regain control of his own show. "Owen, let's just take a breath here and reset this conversation. I think we've both gotten a little heated." But Wilson was having none of it, his response cutting through Colbert's attempt at false reconciliation like a knife. "Don't you dare try to make this about both of us getting heated, Stephen. I defended myself against your unprovoked attacks. You're the one who decided to turn an entertainment show into your personal therapy session at my expense." The clarity of Wilson's position made Colbert's behavior look even more indefensible, and the host's stammering attempts to justify himself only dug the hole deeper. "I was just trying to have a meaningful conversation," Colbert protested weakly, but Wilson's sharp laugh cut him off. "Meaningful? You call ambushing someone about their suicide attempt meaningful? You call exploiting someone's mental health struggles for your audience's entertainment meaningful?" Each question landed like a physical blow, and Colbert's face grew redder with each accusation. The audience, now fully aware they were witnessing something unprecedented, sat in stunned silence as Wilson delivered what would become one of the most quoted takedowns in late-night television history. "You know what's really meaningful, Stephen? Treating people with respect. Using your platform to build people up instead of tearing them down for cheap laughs. Actually caring about your guests as human beings instead of just content for your show." Colbert's final attempt to maintain his authority revealed just how deeply Wilson's words had affected him. "This is my show, Owen, and I'll conduct interviews however I see fit." The petulant response of a man who had completely lost the moral high ground, and Wilson's comeback was devastating in its simplicity. "Your show, your reputation. And after tonight, everyone's going to know exactly what kind of person you really are." As Wilson headed toward the exit, Colbert made the fatal error that would define this entire incident, shouting after him with venom that shocked everyone present. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Owen. Maybe next time you'll be prepared for actual journalism instead of softball questions." The comment was so unprofessional, so cruel, and so completely inappropriate that even Colbert's most loyal staff members visibly cringed. Wilson paused at the edge of the stage, turning back to deliver a final statement that would be replayed millions of times across social media. "Actual journalism? Stephen, what you did tonight wasn't journalism. It was bullying with better lighting. And the really sad part is you don't even seem to understand the difference." With that, he walked off the stage, leaving Colbert sitting alone at his desk, facing an audience that was no longer sure if they should applaud their host or the guest, who had just schooled him. The show's producers, scrambling to salvage what they could from the disaster, quickly cut to commercial break, but not before Colbert was caught on camera muttering something under his breath that lip readers would later identify as a profanity directed at Wilson. Security personnel were seen escorting Wilson through the backstage area, not because he was causing trouble, but because the production team was desperately trying to prevent him from speaking to any media outlets waiting outside the studio. The final image of this unprecedented confrontation was Colbert sitting at his desk during the commercial break, his head in his hands, finally understanding that his attempt to create viral content had instead created a viral disaster that would define his legacy in ways he never intended. The calculated cruelty that he had hidden behind comedy and charm had been exposed in the brightest possible spotlight, and there was no taking it back. That's the story of how Owen Wilson schooled Stephen Colbert on his own show and walked away, with his dignity intact while leaving the host to face the consequences of his own cruelty. What do you think really motivated Colbert's attack on Wilson that night? Was it ratings, personal issues, or something else entirely? Drop your theories in the comments below, And make sure to subscribe for more stories about the moments when Hollywood's facade falls away and we see who people really are.